Aariv Malhotra thought he had found the perfect bride in Selena Varma, but behind her beauty and grace lay secrets that would shatter his life in Paris, dragging both of them into a shocking crime that stunned the world. Aariv Malhotra had always imagined his wedding as a grand affair, a celebration that would make him feel powerful and admired. Coming from a wealthy family in Delhi, he had been raised with high expectations and a constant push to achieve more than others around him. When he met Selena Varma through mutual acquaintances, he was captivated by her charm almost immediately. She seemed perfect, not only in appearance, but in the way she carried herself with grace, confidence, and an air of mystery that fascinated him. Unlike other women he had known, Selena never revealed too much. She was polished, intelligent, and careful with her words. It only took a short time before Aariv was convinced she was the one. The wedding was arranged swiftly, with both families agreeing to hold the event in Paris, a city of elegance and romance. The days leading up to the ceremony were a blur of expensive preparations, glamorous outfits, and endless admiration from friends and relatives. Everyone was enchanted by Selena's beauty. She wore traditional Indian bridal attire during the ceremonies, but added a European touch that left people whispering about how sophisticated she looked. Guests praised Aariv for finding such an extraordinary partner. His pride swelled with every compliment, but beneath his outward happiness, there were fleeting moments of unease. Selena never spoke much about her childhood. Her family background was vague, and when relatives asked questions about her past, she always shifted the conversation. Aariv noticed it but dismissed the thought, believing that her elegance and presence were enough proof of her worth. The wedding itself was nothing short of extravagant. A grand Parisian hall was decorated with golden lights, floral arrangements that filled the air with fragrance, and music that echoed through the night. Relatives and friends from India and abroad gathered, their laughter mixing with the sound of clinking glasses and celebratory cheer. Selena walked into the hall, her jewelry catching the light, her face painted with perfection. Aariv stood beside her, feeling like the most fortunate man alive. They exchanged vows under the glittering chandeliers, the entire evening captured by photographers and videographers eager to preserve the image of a perfect couple. Yet, for all the dazzling appearances, there were shadows lurking beneath. Claire Dumont, a staff member assisting with arrangements, noticed something odd about the bride. Selena seemed nervous whenever anyone mentioned her personal life, and at times, her smile faltered when she thought no one was watching. Claire brushed it off as pre-wedding jitters, but the thought lingered at the back of her mind. Aariv, on the other hand, was too overwhelmed by pride to see these cracks. He had secured not just a wife, but a symbol of success. To him, marrying Selena in Paris was proof of his achievement and superiority, something his peers in Delhi could only envy. As the night went on, the couple was showered with blessings, gifts, and endless photographs. They danced under the warm lights, presenting the image of love and happiness that everyone expected. Guests whispered about how perfect they looked together, comparing them to royalty. But in the corners of the hall, away from the crowd, Selena's behavior remained strangely guarded. She avoided long conversations, kept her distance from probing relatives, and excused herself often under the pretense of feeling tired. When the celebrations ended, Aariv felt triumphant. To him, this was the beginning of a dream life. But behind Selena's graceful demeanor was a silence that hid more than exhaustion. Secrets buried deep within her followed her into this marriage, secrets she feared would one day destroy everything. As they left the wedding venue that night, Paris glowing behind them with its timeless beauty, no one could imagine the storm that was quietly brewing. The lavish ceremony had been a performance, an illusion of perfection. Beneath the golden lights and celebratory cheers, there was already a fracture forming, one that would grow into something dangerous and unforgettable in the days to come. After the grand wedding celebrations ended, Aariv and Selena checked into a luxury Parisian hotel that promised privacy and elegance. To outsiders, they were the perfect newlyweds, walking through the marble-floored lobby in fine clothes, smiling as the staff congratulated them. Aariv carried himself with pride, still intoxicated by the attention and admiration he had received. Selena, in contrast, seemed quieter, her smile fragile as though it was held together by effort alone. To everyone else, she appeared like a shy bride overwhelmed by her new life. But inside their suite, the perfect image began to shift. At first, Aariv convinced himself that the strangeness between them was nothing unusual. Many new couples took time to adjust, he thought. Selena avoided intimacy, often giving excuses that sounded believable, complaining of headaches, tiredness, or the exhaustion from the elaborate celebrations. Aariv accepted her words, though a faint uneasiness began to creep into his thought. He had imagined passion and closeness after the wedding, but what he encountered instead was distance. Each time he reached for her, she pulled away subtly, creating a wall that grew higher with each passing day. It was not only physical closeness that seemed impossible. Conversations about the future felt hollow. Whenever Aariv asked about her past, Selena grew vague, shifting the topic or offering half answers that never satisfied. She mentioned relatives without giving names, spoke of childhood without sharing details, and kept her phone locked at all times. At first, he thought she was simply shy, but as the days went on, her secrecy became harder to ignore. Aariv's pride told him not to confront her too quickly. He did not want to look foolish or paranoid, yet his instincts began to whisper that something was deeply wrong. The staff at the hotel also noticed unusual patterns. Claire Dumont, a young woman working in guest services, had been assigned to assist the couple during their stay. Claire was charmed by Aariv's confidence, but her attention lingered on Selena. She saw how often Selena left the room late at night, slipping quietly through the hallways as though hoping no one would notice. Sometimes she returned after only half an hour, other times after longer absences. Her eyes darted nervously, scanning the lobby each time she re-entered, as though afraid of being followed. Claire had seen many couples pass through the hotel, but this behavior stood out. Inside the suite, tension was growing sharper. Aariv started noticing strange details, documents peeking out of Selena's handbag that seemed to bear different names, a photograph that she quickly tucked away when he entered the room, whispered phone calls in the bathroom where her voice trembled with urgency. He pretended not to notice, but each discovery fueled his suspicion. Nights became restless, his mind turning over endless possibilities, unable to escape the feeling that he had been deceived. Selena, on her part, seemed increasingly uneasy. She avoided eye contact, ate her meals in silence, and locked herself in the bathroom for long periods. Sometimes when she thought Aariv was asleep, she sat near the window, staring out at the glowing city, her expression filled with dread. There was something she feared, something she could not speak of, but that weighed on her with crushing force. To those outside their private world, the couple still looked perfect. They appeared together in the hotel lobby, dressed well, speaking politely, smiling for anyone who glanced their way. Other guests admired their elegance, unaware of the invisible distance between them, but inside their room, the tension grew unbearable. Aariv was no longer simply suspicious. He was restless with a hunger to know the truth. Every glance at Selena's guarded expressions deepened his frustration. The honeymoon phase that Aariv had imagined had never truly begun. Instead, he found himself living with a stranger, someone who shared his room, but kept her life locked away behind invisible walls. He told himself he would uncover her secrets soon, that no lie could remain hidden forever. In the silence of the hotel suite, the foundations of their marriage were already cracking, setting the stage for the revelation that would shatter everything he thought he knew. One evening, the weight of suspicion pressed too heavily on Aariv for him to ignore. The uneasiness that had been building inside him since the wedding reached its peak. Selena had stepped into the bathroom, the sound of running water masking her presence, and for the first time, Aariv gave in to the urge he had been resisting. He walked across the suite to her handbag, his hands trembling slightly, his mind caught between fear and determination. He told himself he was only looking for reassurance, that he would find nothing unusual and laugh at his doubt. But as he unzipped the bag, what he uncovered shook him to his core. Inside, buried beneath layers of cosmetics and neatly folded scarves, were documents that carried different names. One identification card bore the name Sahil Varma, with a photo unmistakably of Selena, only dressed differently. There were medical papers too, official letters that spoke of procedures and treatments that explained what Selena had hidden from him. The truth was undeniable. Selena was not the woman she had claimed to be. She had been born male and had lived an entirely different life before constructing the identity she now carried. Aariv felt the air rush out of his chest as though he had been struck. The glossy image of the bride he had proudly displayed to his family and friends shattered instantly. Every unanswered question, every strange behavior, every moment of distance now made sense in a way that horrified him. The perfect bride he had married in Paris was not the person he believed her to be. Rage surged within him, burning away the last traces of affection he had tried to hold on to. His pride, his reputation, and his cultural expectations collided violently with this revelation, leaving no space for calm reasoning. As he stood there with the papers in his hands, his thoughts spiraled. He imagined the whispers of his relatives, the mocking eyes of his peers in Delhi, the shame of being deceived. His entire sense of identity seemed attacked. He thought of the extravagant wedding, the money spent, the admiration he had soaked in, and how quickly it could all collapse into humiliation. His hands tightened around the documents, crumpling the edges as anger took full control of him. Meanwhile, Selena emerged from the bathroom, unaware that the secret she had guarded so carefully was no longer hidden. Her footsteps were soft, but to Aariv they sounded like thunder announcing betrayal. When she noticed the bag disturbed and the papers in his grip, her face drained of color. For a split second, fear flashed in her eyes, confirming what he already knew. There was no denial possible, no excuse that could erase what he had discovered. In that charged moment, silence filled the room. The city lights from Paris flickered through the window, casting shadows across the walls, but inside the suite, a storm unlike any other was brewing. Aariv's mind replayed every smile, every vague answer, every night she turned away from him, now seen through the lens of deception. The love he once thought he felt was gone, replaced by fury and a sense of betrayal so deep it left him shaking. He could not think of consequences or reason. His thoughts were consumed by one overpowering idea. He had been fooled. What should have been the happiest days of his life had turned into a humiliation he could not bear. With every passing second, his anger grew more dangerous, transforming into a violent impulse. Selena backed away instinctively, her eyes pleading without words, but Aariv's world had already collapsed. The documents scattered onto the floor, their truth exposed, and with them the fragile illusion of a perfect marriage was destroyed. In that room, the fairy tale dream unraveled completely, leaving only betrayal, rage, and the promise of violence to come. The air inside the hotel suite turned heavy, charged with a tension that seemed almost physical. Aariv's fury had reached a boiling point, and the sight of Selena standing before him, pale and shaken, only fueled his rage further. The documents scattered across the floor felt like weapons in his mind, each one cutting through his pride and dignity. His breaths grew shallow, his heart raced wildly, and the silence between them became unbearable. What had once been a dream of romance had transformed into something dark and violent, a nightmare he could not escape. The first outburst was sudden, a violent shove that sent Selena crashing against the dresser. She gasped, stunned by the force, and clutched her side in pain. Aariv's hands trembled as he glared at her, his thoughts clouded by humiliation and anger. To him she was no longer the graceful bride who had dazzled their guests, but the embodiment of betrayal. Every ounce of frustration he had bottled up since the wedding erupted in that moment. His voice never rose into words, but his actions screamed louder than anything he could have said. Selena stumbled to her feet, trying to move away, but the suite offered little space for escape. She backed toward the corner, her eyes wide with terror, her body trembling under the weight of fear. Aariv advanced, his fists clenched, his face twisted in rage. He struck her again, a brutal blow that sent her sprawling to the carpet. The sound of the impact echoed through the walls, carrying beyond the closed door. She cried out, but her voice was muffled against the thick silence of the luxurious room, a cry that became another mark in the violence unraveling inside. The scene grew more chaotic with each passing second. Furniture rattled, a lamp shattered, and the pristine order of the suite was reduced to chaos. Selena's jewelry scattered across the floor as she struggled to shield herself from the storm of blows. Blood trickled from a wound near her temple, staining the ivory rug beneath her. Aariv's movements were wild and unrestrained, driven by an anger so consuming that reason no longer existed. In his mind, every strike was a punishment for the deception, a desperate attempt to reclaim the control he felt had been stolen from him. Through the walls, muffled sounds began to reach neighboring rooms. Guests paused, their celebrations interrupted by strange noises, thuds, crashes, a faint cry. It was Claire Dumont, the hotel staff member who had already sensed something unusual about the couple, who grew most alarmed. Passing by the corridor, she stopped at their door and pressed her ear against it. What she heard chilled her to the bone. Without hesitation, she rushed to the front desk, her voice urgent as she demanded someone call the police. Back inside the suite, Selena's strength was fading. She tried to crawl toward the door, her hands shaking as they reached for the handle, but Aariv pulled her back with brutal force. His grip left bruises on her arms, and his fury showed no sign of slowing. The elegant honeymoon suite had become a battleground, the air filled with the sound of violence and despair. The turning point came with the arrival of help. The noise drew more attention, and soon the muffled commotion outside the room grew louder. Voices, hurried footsteps, the unmistakable knock of authority. Aariv froze for a moment, his chest heaving, his shirt damp with sweat. Selena lay motionless on the carpet, her breaths shallow, her body battered. The door burst open as hotel staff and police officers flooded the suite. The scene they found was horrifying. The once pristine room was wrecked, furniture overturned, glass shattered and blood marking the floor. Selena's fragile body was barely conscious, her face bruised and swollen. Aariv stood over her, his fist still clenched, his expression a mix of rage and shock at being caught. The officers wasted no time. They seized him, pulling him back with force as he resisted, his shouts echoing with denial and fury. Selena was lifted carefully onto a stretcher as paramedics arrived, her life hanging by a thread. The perfect image of a newlywed couple had collapsed entirely, leaving behind only devastation. What had begun as a glamorous wedding trip had now turned into a crime scene, and the world outside that room was about to learn of a scandal that would shake not only Aariv's life but also everyone connected to them. The hours after the assault became the most critical in the unraveling of the story. Selena was rushed through the corridors of the Parisian hotel on a stretcher, her face swollen, her breathing weak, and her consciousness slipping in and out. Paramedics worked frantically to stabilize her as curious guests, and shocked staff looked on, their murmurs filling the lobby. Aariv meanwhile was dragged out in handcuffs, his once celebrated appearance now disheveled, his eyes burning with a mix of rage and humiliation. The police officers forced him into their vehicle, and the flashing blue lights carried him away from the life of luxury he had so proudly displayed only days before. At the hospital, Selena underwent emergency treatment. Doctors managed to save her life, but her injuries were severe, leaving her scarred both physically and emotionally. The medical staff documented every bruise and fracture, their reports becoming vital evidence in what was quickly turning into an international scandal. News of the assault spread rapidly. Parisian media outlets seized on the sensational elements: an Indian groom, a lavish wedding, a bride with hidden truths, and a brutal attack in one of the world's most romantic cities. Headlines painted a dramatic picture, and within days the story had reached India, sparking outrage and endless debate. Inspector Julien Moreau led the investigation with meticulous care. He pieced together the timeline, gathering witness statements from hotel staff and guests who had heard the chaos. Claire Dumont's testimony stood out. She had raised the alarm, and her observations about Selena's strange behavior earlier now gave weight to the case. The scattered documents retrieved from the hotel suite provided the missing puzzle pieces. They revealed Selena's secret identity, the life she had lived before meeting Aariv, and the reason for her secrecy. What had been her private truth was now exposed to the world, dissected by strangers and amplified by the media. Aariv, during interrogation,
tried to defend himself by claiming betrayal and humiliation. He argued that he had been deceived, that his actions were a reaction to discovering the truth about his spouse. But the investigators saw through the excuses. The violence he had inflicted went far beyond shock or anger. It was deliberate, brutal, and nearly fatal. The case against him grew stronger with every piece of evidence. His fingerprints were found on the scattered documents, his bloodied clothes were confiscated, and the photographs of Selena's injuries painted a story that could not be twisted in his favor. As the trial began in a Paris courtroom, the world watched closely. International media turned the proceedings into daily headlines, each article highlighting the clash between cultural pride, identity, and human rights. The courtroom was filled with tension. On one side sat Aariv, once admired for his wealth and charm, now a prisoner awaiting judgment. On the other sat Selena, fragile but resolute, her scars visible reminders of the violence she had endured. The prosecutor painted a chilling picture of a man consumed by rage, unwilling to control his impulses, and ready to destroy another human being to protect his pride. Witnesses were called, evidence was displayed, and slowly the narrative unraveled before the court. Aariv's defense team tried to shift the blame, emphasizing deception, but the judge and jury could not overlook the savagery of the assault. In the end, the verdict was clear. Aariv was guilty of aggravated assault with intent to cause serious harm. The sentence was handed down, years in a French prison, far from home, his once celebrated name now synonymous with disgrace. For Selena, survival was both a victory and a curse. She had lived through the assault, but the scars remained a constant reminder of the night her secret was exposed in the most violent way possible. In interviews following the trial, she spoke not of deception, but of the right to exist without fear. Her story became one that resonated globally, sparking conversations about identity, acceptance, and the dangers of unchecked anger. Mina Kapoor, Aariv's cousin who had doubted the rushed marriage from the beginning, watched from afar as her family's reputation crumbled. The Malhotras, once proud and envied, now carried the shame of Aariv's actions, whispered about in social circles and judged by their peers. What was meant to be a marriage of grandeur had ended as a cautionary tale etched into headlines and court records. The final chapter of this tragedy was not just about crime and punishment, but about the fragile line between illusion and truth. In Paris, a city known for love, the story of Aariv and Selena became a haunting reminder that beneath the brightest lights, the darkest secrets often wait to be uncovered, and when they are, the consequences can be devastating and irreversible.